Alright YouTube, HallstotheWall back here on YGO Pro. What you see in front of you is my current ABC Decklist. For the most part I'd say it's pretty standard, I guess you can say, with some of the newer cards and newer support that has been released and that's going to be released in Eternity Code. So to start off here, I'm just going to get into the list. I run 3A Assault Core, 3B Buster Drake, and 3C Crush Wyvern. That's pretty standard for the most part. You want to run 3 of each piece, so that way there is more consistency and you will have them in your opening hand more often than not. I have seen some lists that run 3B, 2A, and 2C, but in my opinion you definitely want to run 3 of each piece to maximize the amount of times you will see them. I run 1 Union Driver, which has not been released yet, but is going to be released in Eternity Code. What this card does, it essentially gets around the restriction of Union Hanger. Union Hanger, when you equip a monster to a Union monster you control by Union Hanger's effect, you cannot special summon the monster you equipped by its effect that turn. Union Driver gets around that. So when you equip Union Driver to a monster, you can banish Union Driver to then equip that target with another appropriate monster from your deck. And you can then special summon that monster from being equipped in your spell and trap zone. So that's how Union Driver gets around the restrictions that Union Hanger puts in place. So I think this card is going to be very important for the ABC strategy once it is released. I'm only running 1 copy here because it's not a card that you want to open in your opening hand. Obviously, you want to equip it from your deck to a monster with Union Hanger. If I was running Pot of Desires, then I would probably up the count of the card, but as you can probably see, I'm not running Pot of Desires. I'm running a different draw spell, but I will get into that in a little bit. Next part of the deck, I'm running the Galaxy Soldier engine, if that's what you want to call it. Run triple Galaxy Soldier and 2 Photon Orbital. The Galaxy Soldier is there because it's essentially a free special summon from your hand, assuming you have another light monster in your hand. And once it special summons itself that way, it replaces itself by adding another copy of itself from your deck to your hand. So I run this card in order to be able to make Cyber Dragon Nova to then rank up into Cyber Dragon Infinity so that I can have another form of disruption. Whether going first or second, I think it's important to have that so that way you can pretty much protect yourself against your opponent's cards and anything they might throw at you in response to what you do. And the Photon Orbital is essentially to search Galaxy Soldier. So once Galaxy Soldier is on the field, special summoned or either normal summoned, you can equip Photon Orbital to the Galaxy Soldier and then send it from the field to the graveyard to add another Galaxy Soldier from your deck to your hand. So that is essentially a very easy way to get access to your Cyber Dragon Nova and Infinity, because when you special summon the Galaxy Soldier by its effect, it's going to replace itself and get you another Galaxy Soldier. And if you have Photon Orbital in your hand and equip it to the Galaxy Soldier, by sending the Photon Orbital to the graveyard, you're going to get another Galaxy Soldier in your hand to use as fodder to special summon the Galaxy Soldier you previously retrieved from your hand. So it's very neat interaction right there, and I think it's very important for the strategy, especially in this particular build that I'm running. Next, the only hand trap I decided to run in the main deck was Psyframe Gear Gamma and Driver, so the Psyframe package if you will. I think this card is very good against the meta right now, especially because your opponent can't react to it with Called by the Grave. There are definitely cards that can stop this, such as Ash Blossom. Actually, I learned that the hard way in the duel on YGO Pro. But there are little interactions like that that your opponent might not necessarily think of, but they can't use Call by the Grave to it, and I like it in this deck. As you can see, I don't currently have a side deck, but when I do create one, I'll probably run other cards like Effect Veiler and maybe Ash Blossom, but side decks are really meta dependent, and you really need to take into account the current game state in order to properly side deck. But moving on to the spells, I run triple Union Hanger, obviously. This card is, in my opinion, the heart and soul of the deck. And I run Terraforming and Set Rotation to search it out. The other set rotation target is Magical Midbreaker Field. I'm honestly not too sure how crazy I am about the set rotation idea, because while it is essentially a 5th copy of Union Hanger, I don't know how I feel about the idea of not being able to use another field spell while my opponent still has Magical Midbreaker Field, either face up or face down on their side of the field. So I might do away with that and just have the 3 hard copies of Union Hanger and the 1 Terraforming to search it, and I'll try and find one other card to add in there to the mix. But I like this now for the time being, but like I said, I might change it. And next I have some of the best going second cards in the game right now in Lightning Storm and Dark Ruler No More. These cards just essentially help in breaking your opponent's board, which is the kind of strategy I'm following with this build. Ideally with this build, you would dwindle your opponent's resources so they have as little as possible, and then go into your ABC Dragon Buster and Cyber Dragon Infinity if you have the proper resources. With Dragon Buster, you pick apart their remaining board, and if you use Dark Ruler No More, you're not going to be able to do any battle damage, but at least when your opponent goes into their next turn, they're not going to have as many resources as they had before. And ideally, you'll just be able to control the game from there with your disruptions. And I run 3 Called by the Grave. That's just to ensure that your plays go off, because this deck, the Heart and Soul Union Hanger, it searches, so you don't want to get hand trapped there. So Called by the Grave is just good to have. And as many people say, it's essentially a pseudo trap. So if you don't use it on your turn, you can set it and use it against your opponent on the following turn. And I really like Called by the Grave. Maybe in a build I'd try to make more consistent, I wouldn't run it, but in this particular build there's a lot of searching that goes on, and I think it's a critical card to have. But moving on to the draw engine, I'm running 2 Performapal Popper-Up. So I actually came across this card in a Orcus deck profile that won a tournament maybe a month ago or so, and I like the idea of essentially it's draw 3 depending on how many cards you have in your hand, but I like the idea of sacrificing life points as opposed to banishing key engine pieces in your deck to draw cards. And as I mentioned, it allows you to draw up to 3 cards, so I mean, that's good in my opinion, but it really depends on how many cards you currently have in your hand. And while being low on life points can, I guess, influence the game in time, I think it's a decent trade-off. I'm really still flirting with the idea of using this card and experimenting with it, so in the long run it may be more wise to use Pot of Desires, and then I would just have to increase the count of Union Drivers and maybe Photon Orbitals that I run in the deck. But I think for this particular build that I'm experimenting with at the moment, I like that trade-in of life points as opposed to key engine pieces. And then Upstart Goblin. I don't really know if it's necessary, but I just like the drawing cards aspect, because this deck really does struggle with draw power, and sometimes you might not open an ideal hand, and the only way you can try to advance your game state is by drawing into your deck and deck thinning, pretty much. And lastly, I run 3 traps in the main deck for this going second build. Another great going second card, Evenly Matched. So in tandem with Lightning Storm and Dark Ruler No More, this card just assists in picking apart your opponent's board. Unfortunately, you do have to forego your battle phase, but as I mentioned, with a strategy that you're employing to take control of the game and limit the interactions your opponent can have, I definitely think this card is well worth it for that. So that does it for the main deck. Moving on to the extra deck, I unfortunately run the one copy of ABC Dragon Buster that Konami limited to 1, but I'm still willing to give this a try and see if it's something that can be successful. The card's really self-explanatory. You can tag out and bring back the pieces that you used to summon it, and then use those to now link climb on your next turn. Before, you would use those to make another buster, but link climbing into something like a Borreload or Boral Sword I think is definitely well worth it. Next, I might replace this card, but while experimenting for the time being, I think it's okay to run Dugaris the Timeless. I mainly use it for its draw effect, because like I mentioned, the deck struggles with draw power and draw consistency, so being able to dig into your deck for more resources is definitely beneficial. The only issue that I've been running into with it is, even if I do draw cards, you might not have an optimal hand, and all you're going to have on the board is your one Dugaris the Timeless, because you'll have devoted 2 level 4 monsters as materials to make it, and that can kind of leave you in a difficult situation if you have nothing else to extend with from that point. So I'm trying to figure out if there's anything better that I can run, like maybe another negate or something that can destroy cards my opponent controls, but for the time being I'm sticking with that. Then the Cyber Dragon package, which I discussed earlier. Cyber Dragon Infinity is just a great form of disruption to have, either going first or second, really. In a going first build that I've experimented with before, the ideal end board would be this card and an ABC Dragon Buster. That's the ideal scenario. More often than not, you'll end up with just the Cyber Dragon Infinity and the ABC Dragon Buster. But actually, now that I think about it, a card that I could actually replace with, or use in place of Dugaris the Timeless, could be Time Thief Redoer. So that way, if I have a Cyframe Lord Lambda on the field, I will get its search to add Cyframe Gear Gamma to my hand. So that would be 3 interruptions that I would have. If that's in the going first build, obviously, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Next, I run 1 Clara and Rushka, the Ventrilla duo. So I actually came across this when I was watching a deck profile of one of Calvin Tahan's ABC builds. As one of the most well-renowned ABC players out there, you obviously want to try and emulate what he's done for his ABC decks. Obviously now things are a little different because you can't quite take advantage of the Sky Striker engine with Engage being banned, which makes me very sad, but fortunately you can only use what you have. But even though you have to almost forego your entire turn to take advantage of Clara and Rushka, it doesn't necessarily matter too much, especially with when you run cards like Dark Ruler No More and Evenly Matched. You kind of have to forego certain things anyways to take advantage of those cards. So that's why I have this in here, and I don't necessarily see too much of a problem with it. Next, I run Barricade Board Blocker. This is just a link 2 I use to essentially protect my Union Hanger from destruction. That's really the only thing I use it for in here. I guess sometimes its discard effect can come in handy if you're trying to get some of your ABC pieces into the graveyard, but more often than not, I would just use it to protect my Union Hanger. And Union Carrier, I run 2 copies of this, mostly because I don't want my only copy to get banished off of True King Lithosagem, so that's really the reason why I run 2. In a perfect world, I might run just 1 and try and find something else that's important to run in the extra deck, but I think it's definitely a card worth having 2 of, just in case you need to make another one. Then Cyframe Lord Lambda, I already touched upon. I also run the Nightmare package. Nightmare Cerberus, Unicorn, and Phoenix. I just think these cards are really important to have as a toolbox. I honestly try to run all three of these if I can in any deck that I build. Especially in something like Burning Abyss, they're great going second, and I like to try and employ that same state of mind with this, that they're great going second, they're great for breaking boards, but ideally you actually won't really use these too much on your first turn, because you want to get your key pieces on board like ABC Dragon Buster and Cyber Dragon and Infinity. So yeah, you might have the resources to make these, but they're important resources that you need on board. I have them in here mostly just for the grind game and to keep disrupting my opponent as the duel goes on, in case it does get into a grind match. And then lastly, I run 3 Link 4s. I have Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess, Orla Dragon, and Oral Sword. I think these are pretty self-explanatory for the most part. Appaloosa is just the monster negate once per chain, and Borreload and Boral Sword just really help you win games. You might not necessarily make a first turn Boral Sword or Borreload, depending on the resources you have, but especially for the grind game, I think they're important to have, because the way this particular build interacts with your opponent, the chances of having a grind game late in the match are really high, I'd say. At least that's what I've seen with testing so far. But I do plan on showing some test videos with some of the competition on YGO Pro going second, just to give you guys an idea of what this build can do. But as for the side deck that I mentioned, I don't have a side deck yet, because that is something I'm still really working on as part of my game, and I want to bring you guys a good competitive side deck as opposed to just throwing things together. But that is going to do it for this deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed and liked the video, and subscribe to my channel to see future Yu-Gi-Oh content. Thank you for watching.